You know that I love to go to that galaxy far, far away. And I'm such a fan of everything that Disney does in the footsteps of Star Wars creator George Lucas. However, I know that some fans are worried about the future of Star Wars. We've seen a number of television series, and some of them were excellent, and others were kind of, okay, but not as good as we expect Star Wars to be. And this is not the only big franchise that seems to be a bit in a rut. This is also true for the Marvel Cinematic Universe that, of course, has been going strong for more than a decade now after the first Iron Man movie was such a success. And most of the success of the MCU is thanks to one guy, Kevin Feige, who, when he started to work for Disney, soon showed that he had an incredible grip and grasp of what the Marvel Universe could be. He knew that in order to keep people coming back for more, these stories needed to be related to one another. Kevin Feige was the one who made sure that they started to develop on the foundation of the success of Iron Man, this big story that would ultimately result in this bundling of superheroes in the Avengers. And then from there would be another phase and another phase. And so every time he was the one who made sure that that universe stayed consistent between all these different stories. The one thing that he didn't expect, and I don't think that Disney expected it, we the fans did not expect this, was that there is something like too much of a good thing. That's kind of how a lot of Marvel fans have felt recently with this ongoing tsunami of great movies. All these movies are entertaining. They're not all on the level of the Avengers, but there's certainly great, entertaining, good popcorn movies. You always know that you get quality, that it's going to be fun. But in addition to that, we also had a massive amount of television series, especially in the first 2 years of Disney Plus, when Disney was trying to grab market share. They would just finance any idea. Let's just film something and then we'll fix it in post. And that turned out to be a major problem for a number of recent television series like Captain America, and then more recently, Secret Invasion. Those shows were completely filmed and everything, and then something happened, and they had to reevaluate the story and sometimes make an incredible amount of changes. For Secret Invasion, they had to redo almost everything. I think originally that story was going to be about a war between Russia and Ukraine. Then, of course, the real war exploded, and they had to completely redo the entire story. The end result was very mediocre. Even though it starred Samuel L. Jackson, one of the biggest stars and one of the greatest actors that they had in the Marvel Universe. But it just didn't work. And the thing is, Star Wars had a similar problem with a diminishing return on investment. We had the sequels, and the first one was amazing. The Force Awakens feels just like Star Wars. Yeah, it was designed to be just like Star Wars. And then the second one was controversial. However, it was still very innovative, groundbreaking. It did stuff that we had never seen in the Star Wars narrative universe. And then we get this hastily made, kind of rushed movie, The Rise of Skywalker, which I think still has a lot of redeeming aspects, but it wasn't on the kind of quality that a finale, a conclusion of this decade-spanning Skywalker saga deserved. And all this was caused by problems that were similar to what was going on in the Marvel Universe, in a sense that they first had hired someone to write and to direct, was it Colin Trevorrow? To write and direct this last episode of the Skywalker saga, and then they saw what he came up with and they didn't like it. And so they hired J.J. Abrams back, who was like, okay, well, I didn't expect to be back. And in fact, the previous movie, The Last Jedi, took the story in a totally different direction from what I thought, what I would have done. And so how am I going to make this U-turn and bring it back to my original ideas? And so that's why this third movie feels so contrived at times. The problems for Star Wars when it comes to television were similar in the sense that they at first started to make tons and tons of new television series, and they announced plans to the stakeholders like, oh, this is coming next, and then we're going to do this. But the problem was they weren't ready for it. It was just too much in too little time. And so a number of these television series were canceled even before they started shooting. There were some other projects like movies that were pushed way into the future. And then some of the other television series just didn't pan out to be as good as they might have been had they given it more time and more care. One, I think, of the worst examples, unfortunately, was the Book of Boba Fett, which I felt had a ton of potential, great actors, great chemistry, but especially the way in which the story ended was so cliche. And then Obi-Wan Kenobi was good, but it could have been a lot better if it had been a movie. The only exception to this was Andor. Andor, everybody agrees that Andor had the best writing we had ever seen in the Star Wars universe. And that was a surprise for Disney as well. They didn't think that people would appreciate that. They thought that the Star Wars fans would be much more enthusiastic about the Book of Boba Fett and Obi-Wan Kenobi and now the Ahsoka series, because that's what they had done for a decade. And now all of a sudden everybody starts raving about Andor, which they kind of allowed to be made, but just like Rogue One, when that was in development, they didn't expect much of it. And now they're starting to realize, well, wait a minute, the Star Wars fans have actually evolved and matured, and we should have planned more of this, but instead we already have this roster of upcoming projects. We committed to them, and we probably already invested millions into these upcoming projects. There is nothing like Andor on our timeline. And so some Star Wars fans have been clamoring for a change of leadership at Disney when it comes to Star Wars. And this is an old gripe of a certain segment of the Star Wars fandom, where they keep circulating rumors that Kathleen Kennedy, who they see as the culprit of all this bad quality Star Wars, according to them, is going to be fired anytime now, and someone else will step in and take the reins and save Star Wars. And the latest rumor is that that person is going to be Kevin Feige, the one who has been leading the Marvel Cinematic Universe ever since Iron Man. And probably one of the reasons that they speculate about this is that Kevin Feige, a while ago, was seen as a potential writer-director for an upcoming Star Wars movie. Kevin Feige was so busy with Marvel and with the cinematic universe, and so much was going on there that he just didn't have time. So according to this new rumor, Kevin Feige is ready to leave Marvel Studios and switch to Star Wars and take the reins from Kathleen Kennedy and guide Lucasfilm on a new path. And he would be, according to some of the fans, the savior of the Star Wars universe, because this man has proven to know how to build a consistent universe that the fans love. And people project on Kevin Feige so much that I wonder if he is actually someone who could pull that off, who could match all those expectations. It's, I think, very likely that if he were to take the reins at Lucasfilm, fans would still be disappointed and would find reasons to now start to clamor for his departure from Lucasfilm. The thing is, both these franchises are in development. We're watching these stories in a culture that is changing so rapidly. There's a new generation of moviegoers, of TV consumers, and they have different interests. And And now it seems as if the current trend is much more towards niche, and people don't want to have 30,000 followers anymore or go viral every day. No. People want to be more in smaller circles. I think that with Star Wars, I wouldn't be surprised, and with Marvel, that the same trend will have a much bigger impact on the future of these two franchises than a change of directors. Because, let's be honest, Kevin Feige has been successfully running the MCU, but he's still at the helm of the MCU now that Marvel is in trouble and doesn't really know how to proceed. And every movie seems to do worse than the previous one. And a lot of the television series have been canceled or postponed. I wonder if just changing positions within the same organization is going to bring the changes that these storytelling franchises need. I personally would prefer for Star Wars to go more niche, to do smaller budget productions, to maybe just step out of the whole rat race of trying to match fans' expectations and do something unexpected like they did for Andor. But maybe even go more, even lower budget than that. We should never forget where Star Wars comes from. A New Hope was considered to be a niche movie. It was almost like an art house movie. It had zero budget. Everybody thought that movie was going to fail. And it is within the limitations that Lucas was able to nurture his genius and his inventiveness, and he was able to make something out of nothing. And now that Star Wars seems to have unlimited money, I don't think that the organization is challenging itself enough, and it's very likely that the organization has become complacent, just like the church has been complacent especially during centuries where the church was prosperous and successful and powerful. And now that the church is so much in decline, it's almost an incentive for a new springtime where, well, you see what's happening in the Vatican. Pope Francis is trying to help the church to reinvent itself and take a totally different approach to the world around it, because what we've done for decades hasn't worked. So something needs to change. But the solution is not to think big and to just use a lot of money and political solutions. No, the solution is to, let's first listen to one another again. Let's see, what do we perceive is the will of the Holy Spirit? And are there ideas from people that nobody listens to? Shouldn't we listen more to the people on the fringes of the church? Maybe they have something to say. Let's listen to the poor. The church institutions in general have always been under control of the powerful. Well, let's listen to the people who don't have any power. What do they expect? What do they ask? I would love it if an organization like Disney could take a similar approach and maybe even learn from what is happening right now in the Catholic Church and go back to the fans and ask us, what did you love? What don't you like? What do you expect of us? And that's very risky. And that's probably why it won't happen. But I think it's so incredibly essential to listen to the fans. And maybe among the fans, you will discover new talent that is able to bring in new ideas, new blood, and reinvent what Star Wars can be for the future generations. There is a younger generation that grows up with totally different worldview and other hopes and worries. And Star Wars needs to reflect those issues. Just leave Kevin Feige where he is. He's doing a tremendous job. And leave Kathleen Kennedy in place. But don't just listen to your wallet, but listen to what the people actually ask of you, and see if you can find new talent and bring them in and give them a position in your company so that they can do what the old guard can do.